New York City, 8:01 a.m., March 15, 2025. The chandeliers of the Waldorf Astoria glittered like frozen lightning, casting sharp reflections across the polished marble floor of the grand ballroom. John Kennedy, billionaire and former senator, strode to the podium. His navy suit tailored to a razor's edge, his face a mask of controlled fury. He slammed a stack of legal documents down with a thud that echoed like a gavel in a silent courtroom. $500 million, he declared, his voice low and heavy. Each word a bullet aimed at the cameras flashing like gunfire. That's the price Olivia Bennet will pay for slandering my name, my family, my legacy. The room buzzed. With murmurs, reporters scribbling furiously, their pens scratching like insects in the quiet. Across the country, in a modest office in Austin, Texas, Congresswoman Olivia Bennet stood before a flickering television screen, her fingers clenched around a crumpled letter. The paper was worn, its edges soft from being read and reread, but the words were sharp enough to cut. I am his daughter, but he paid to make sure no one ever knew. I don't want his money. I want my name. Signed, Sarah Miller. Olivia's eyes, dark and unyielding, reflected the screen's glow knot. With fear, but with a fire that had been smoldering for days. You picked the wrong fight, she whispered, as the nation held its breath, waiting to see who would break first. The letter had arrived 3 weeks earlier. Postmarked from a small town in Georgia, no return address, just a shaky scrawl in black ink to Congresswoman Bennet, private. Inside was a single page, handwritten, the words spilling out like a confession held back for decades. Sarah Miller, 27, claimed to be the daughter of John Kennedy, a man whose name was synonymous with wealth, power, and untouchability. She wrote of a mother, Maria Miller, who had been paid $5 million to sign a non-disclosure agreement to erase her daughter's existence from the public record. Enclosed was a copy of a DNA test from a lab in Atlanta, dated 2019, stating a 99.97% probability of paternity. Olivia had read it under the dim light of her desk lamp, her pulse quickening with every line. The final sentence had seared itself into her mind. My mother said if I spoke, the world would crush me. But I can't live without my name anymore. Olivia, a rising star in Congress known for her work on housing reform, wasn't one to chase scandals. But something about Sarah's words, the quiet desperation, the weight of a life's silence, had hooked her. Pulled her into a fight she knew could cost her everything. She hadn't hesitated long. 2 days after receiving the letter, Olivia appeared on a live broadcast of the nation's pulse, a primetime news show watched by millions. The host, a sharp-eyed woman named Rachel Cohen, leaned forward as Olivia spoke, her voice steady but laced with steel. There's a young woman out there, Olivia said, who's been denied her identity because a powerful man thought he could buy her silence. I'm here to say her name, Sarah Miller. The studio lights seemed to burn brighter, the air tightening as Rachel pressed for details. Olivia didn't flinch. I have evidence, she said, holding up a sealed envelope. DNA results, payment records, and a contract signed under duress. This isn't a rumor. It's a truth someone paid to bury. The broadcast cut to commercial, but the internet exploded. Hashtags like hashtag Sarah Miller and hashtag name her truth trended within hours. By morning, Kennedy's legal team had filed the lawsuit, a $500 million defamation claim, accusing Olivia of fabricating a malicious narrative to destroy his legacy. The filing called Sarah a fiction and Olivia a political opportunist, but Olivia saw it for what it was, a warning shot, a reminder that men like Kennedy didn't lose in her Capitol Hill office. Olivia sat at her desk, the letter spread out before her like a map to a war she hadn't planned to fight. The room was small, cluttered with policy briefs and coffee cups, but it felt like a fortress now, a place where truths could be guarded. Her phone buzzed incessantly, calls from aides, reporters, even colleagues urging her to back down. Kennedy's untouchable. One senator had whispered in the hallway, his eyes darting nervously. "You're throwing your career into a shredder." Olivia had smiled thinly and walked away. She wasn't naive. She knew the cost of challenging a man whose wealth could buy silence and whose name could bend the law. But she also knew Sarah's story wasn't just about one girl. It was about every person who told their truth, didn't matter what. She opened her laptop and pulled up the files Sarah had sent after their first phone call. A call that had lasted 3 hours, Sarah's voice trembling but resolute. There was the DNA test, notarized and stamped. A scanned copy of a wire transfer receipt. $5 million from a shell company, KJH Holdings, to Maria Miller. Dated April 3, 1998, with a memo line reading educational support. And then there was the ring, a delicate gold bandwidth for my Sarah engraved inside. Sent to Olivia in a padded envelope with a note. "He gave this to my mother the day she signed the papers. She never wore it." Olivia leaned back in her chair, her fingers tracing the ring's cool metal. It was more than evidence. It was a relic of a promise broken, a life erased. She thought of Sarah, living in a small apartment in Decatur, Georgia, working as a librarian. Her life quiet and unremarkable until she'd found the courage to write that letter. Sarah hadn't asked for fame or money, she'd asked for her name, for the right to exist without shame. Olivia's mind flashed to her childhood in Houston, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on. She remembered the sting of being overlooked, the weight of proving you were worth seeing. That's why she'd run for Congress, why she fought for housing reform, why she couldn't let Sarah's letter gather dust. A knock at the door snapped her back to the present. Marcus Hayes, a fellow congressman and former prosecutor, stepped in, his face grim but determined. "You sure about this, Olivia?" he asked, setting a thick folder on her desk. "Kennedy's not just coming for you, he's coming for her." Olivia nodded, her jaw tight. "Let him. We've got something he doesn't, the truth." Marcus opened the folder, revealing a new piece of evidence, a transcript of a recorded conversation, provided by Emily Stone, a former executive assistant to Kennedy. Emily had worked for him in the early 2000s, managing his schedule and overhearing things she wasn't meant to. The recording was grainy but unmistakable, captured during a late-night meeting in Kennedy's Miami office. His voice, smooth and commanding, cut through the static. "The girl can't know. Pay whatever it takes, but no one can know." Other voice, a lawyer named Victor Crane, responded, "It's done. Maria signed, $5 million, clean." Olivia's heart raced as she read the transcript, her fingers gripping the paper. This wasn't just a smoking gun, it was a cannon. "How did Emily get this?" she asked. Marcus shrugged, a faint smile on his lips. "She's smarter than Kennedy thought. Kept a backup of everything, just in case." Emily, now a paralegal in Chicago, had contacted Marcus after Olivia's broadcast, her conscience finally outweighing her fear. She'd sent the recording along with an affidavit, knowing it could cost her safety, the next morning. Olivia met Rachel Cohen, the journalist, in a discreet coffee shop near the Capitol. Rachel, with her sharp eyes and sharper pen, had been sued by Kennedy once before over a story about his questionable real estate deals. She'd lost, but she hadn't forgotten. "You're playing with fire," Rachel said, stirring her coffee. "But I'm in. What do you need?" Olivia slid a USB drive across the table. "Get this to your network. The recording, the DNA, the payment, but don't publish yet. We need to time it with the hearing." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "You're calling a congressional hearing?" Olivia nodded. "Next week, Oversight Committee. I'm requesting a special session to investigate misuse of campaign funds. Kennedy's shell company might have funneled money from his 2018 Senate run. Rachel whistled softly.
What?
Not just defamation he's worried about. That's a federal crime. Olivia's lips curved into a tight smile. Exactly. The days leading up to the hearing were a blur of preparation and pressure. Olivia's office became a war room, with Marcus drafting legal motions and Rachel. Digging through Kennedy's financial records, he uncovered a second payment, $500,000, made to a law firm in 2008. The year Sarah turned 10. The memo line read, "Consulting fees." But the timing matched a charity gala in Miami, where Kennedy had been photographed with a young girl. Emily Stone, who'd been at the event, sent Olivia a grainy copy of the photo. Kennedy, in a tuxedo, standing beside a girl with curly hair and wide eyes, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. The girl was Sarah, her face caught between pride and uncertainty. Emily's note was brief. He knew who she was. He smiled for the camera, then told the staff to keep her mother out of sight. Olivia stared at the photo, her chest tightening. It wasn't just evidence, it was a moment stolen, a child hoping to be seen, a man pretending not to see. Kennedy, meanwhile, was waging his war. From his Palm Beach estate, he orchestrated a media blitz, appearing on every major conservative outlet to decry Olivia's witch hunt. "Sarah Miller doesn't exist," he told a radio host, his voice dripping with disdain. "This is a fabricated story by a desperate politician who wants my Senate seat." His supporters flooded social media with attacks, calling Olivia a liar, a radical, a traitor. Anonymous accounts posted Sarah's addressed her workplace, even her mother's obituary, with captions like "another dead end for a dead story." Olivia's phone lit up with threats, some subtle, some overt. One voicemail left at 2 a.m. hissed, "Drop this, or you'll regret it." She saved it for the FBI. Sarah, too, was under siege. Her inbox filled with hate mail, her apartment vandalized with red paint spelling out "gold digger." But when Olivia called to check on her, Sarah's voice was steady. "I've been invisible my whole life," she said. "I'm not going back." The night before the hearing, Olivia met Sarah in a secure room at a D.C. hotel, away from prying eyes. Sarah, dressed in a simple black sweater, looked younger than her 27 years. Her hands clasped tightly around a cup of tea. She'd brought a box of her mother's belongings, including a worn leather journal. The pages were filled with Maria's handwriting, detailing her life as a single mother, her brief relationship with Kennedy in the 1990s, and the day she signed the NDA. One entry, dated 1998, read, "He said he'd take care of us. A T. Meant money, not love. They threatened to take Sarah if I didn't sign." Olivia read it silently, her throat tightening. "This is enough to break the NDA," she said. "Public interest exception. The courts can't protect him if he coerced her." Sarah nodded, but her eyes were distant. "She never told me," she said softly. "She carried this alone." Olivia reached across the table, her hand covering Sarah's. "She's not alone anymore, and neither are you." The morning of the hearing, Capitol Hill buzzed with tension. Reporters lined the hall's, cameras flashing like strobe lights. Olivia walked through the crowd, her navy blazer crisp, her expression unreadable. Marcus flanked her, carrying a briefcase stuffed with documents. Rachel was already in the press gallery, her laptop open, ready to live tweet every moment. Inside the oversight chamber, the air was thick, the wooden benches packed with lawmakers, staffers, and spectators. Kennedy sat at the front, flanked by two attorneys, his posture rigid, his smile forced. Olivia took her seat at the committee table, her eyes scanning the room. Shh. She spotted Sarah in the back, her face pale but resolute. Clutching a small envelope, the journal, the ring, her truth. The chairwoman, a stern woman named Evelyn Carter, called the session to order. Congresswoman Bennett, you've requested this hearing to address allegations of financial misconduct. Proceed. Olivia stood, her voice calm but cutting. Thank you, Madam Chair. This isn't just about money. It's about a young woman whose identity was erased by power and wealth. It's about a system that lets men like John Kennedy pay to silence the truth. She opened her briefcase and pulled out the DNA test, holding it up for the cameras. Sarah Miller is his daughter. He knew it, paid to hide it, and now sues to silence it. But we're here to let her speak. The room stiffened. Whispers, rippling like wind through dry grass. Kennedy leaned toward his lawyer, muttering something sharp, but Olivia didn't pause. She placed the ring on the table, its gold catching the light. This was a promise, she said. Not to Sarah, but to her silence. Today, we break that promise. Sarah stood, her footsteps echoing as she walked to the witness chair. The cameras zoomed in, the red lights blinking like eyes that couldn't look away. Olivia met her gaze, a silent nod passing between them. The fight was just beginning, and the truth was no longer a whisper, was a roar, ready to shake the walls of power. Washington, D.C., 9 a.m., March 22, 2025. The oversight chamber in Capitol Hill hummed with a tension that clung to the air like static before a storm. Under the unrelenting glare of C-SPAN cameras, Congresswoman Olivia Bennett stood at the committee table, her navy blazer a sharp contrast to the pale marble behind her. In her hands, a red folder, its edges worn, but its contents explosive held. The weight of a truth long buried. Across the room, John Kennedy sat rigid, his tailored suit immaculate, his eyes narrowed to slits, a man accustomed to bending the world to his will. But today, the world was watching, and it wasn't bending. Olivia's voice cut through the silence, steady and unyielding. Madam Chair, we are here to uncover a truth that power and money have tried to erase. She opened the folder, revealing a notarized DNA test, a wire transfer receipt, and a grainy photograph of a young girl standing beside Kennedy. The room held its breath as Sarah Miller, 27, stepped through the double doors. Her black blazer simple, her expression resolute. She wasn't just a witness, she was the truth incarnate. And as she took the witness chair, the chamber felt like it might crack under the weight of her presence. Kennedy's lips curled into a sneer, but Olivia's eyes locked onto his. Ah, silent vow. You can't bury her anymore. The hearing began with a formality that barely masked the undercurrent of chaos. Chairwoman Evelyn Carter, her glasses perched low on her nose, called the session to order. Her voice clipped, but heavy with the gravity of the moment. Congresswoman Bennett, you have the floor to present your evidence. Olivia nodded, her movements deliberate as she laid out the DNA test first. This document, certified by the Atlanta Medical Center in 2019, confirms with 99.97% certainty that Sarah Miller is the biological daughter of John Kennedy. A murmur rippled through the room, not loud but sharp, like the sound of a blade being unsheathed. She held up the wire transfer receipt next, the black ink stark against the white paper. $5 million transferred from KJH Holdings, a shell company linked to Mr. Kennedy, to Maria Miller on April 3, 1998. The memo line reads, educational support. But we know it was payment for silence. Kennedy shifted in his seat, his fingers tapping the table once, twice. A telltale sign of a man who wasn't used to being cornered. His lead attorney, Victor Crane, leaned forward, his voice smooth but urgent. Objection, Madam Chair. This is speculative and irrelevant to the committee's purview. Evelyn's eyes flicked to him, unamused. Overruled. The committee is investigating potential misuse of campaign funds, Mr. Crane. Proceed, Congresswoman. Olivia didn't pause. She pulled out the photograph, a faded snapshot from a 2008 charity gala in Miami. The image projected onto the screen behind her. Kennedy's tuxedo, his hand resting lightly on the shoulder of a young girl with curly hair and wide, uncertain eyes. Sarah, age 10, caught in a moment she'd never forgotten. "This was taken at the Starlight Gala," Olivia said, her voice steady but laced with an edge that made the room lean closer. Mr. Kennedy knew exactly who Sarah was. He smiled for the camera, then ensured her mother was kept out of sight. Sarah's eyes dropped to her lap, her hands clasped tightly, but she didn't flinch. The room's attention shifted to her, the weight of every gaze a reminder of the years she'd spent invisible. Kennedy's voice broke through, sharp and defiant. "That's not her. That could be anyone. This is a stunt, a fabrication." But his protest sounded hollow, the kind of denial that crumbled under scrutiny. Olivia didn't acknowledge him. She turned to Sarah, her voice softening but firm. "Ms. Miller, would you like to speak?" Sarah inhaled deeply, her shoulders rising as if bracing for a weight she'd carried her whole life. She stood, her voice quiet but clear, each word deliberate. "I was 10 years old in that photo," she began, her eyes fixed on the projector screen. "I remember that night. Mr. Kennedy looked at me, smiled, and said to my mother, 'She's got my eyes.' I thought it meant something. I thought he saw me." Her voice cracked, not with weakness, but with the rawness of truth. "The next day, my mother got a call. She cried for hours, then told me we could never talk about him again." The chamber was silent, the kind of silence that felt like the world holding its breath. Sarah continued, her voice growing steadier. "She signed a paper that said I didn't exist. $5 million to erase me. But I'm here now, and I'm not invisible anymore." A single tear rolled down her cheek, but she wiped it away, her chin lifting. The camera zoomed in, capturing every angle of her face, her pain, her defiance. In the back row, a reporter whispered, "Jesus, she's real." Olivia stepped forward, holding up a new piece of evidence, non-disclosure. Agreement, its pages yellowed but legible, signed by Maria Miller and witnessed by Eleanor Kennedy, John's wife. The initials EK were scrawled in blue ink, a quiet betrayal etched into the document. This NDA, Olivia said, bound Maria Miller to silence under threat of legal and financial ruin. It wasn't a choice, it was coercion. Kennedy's attorney shot to his feet again. "This is hearsay, unsubstantiated." But Olivia was ready. She slid a USB drive across the table to the clerk. "Madam Chair, I submit a recording from Emily Stone, a former assistant to Mr. Kennedy, corroborating the coercion." The clerk inserted the drive, and the room filled with the grainy sound of Kennedy's voice, unmistakable, cold as ice. "Pay whatever it takes. The girl can't know, and neither can the public." The murmurs grew louder, a wave of shock rolling through the benches. Kennedy's face drained of color, his hands gripping the table's edge. For the first time, his smirk was gone. Outside the chamber, the world was already reacting. #IAM. Sarah climbed Twitter's trending list, fueled by women sharing their own stories of silenced truths. A college student in Chicago posted a photo of her birth certificate. The father's name blank, with a caption, "I'm Sarah, and I'm done hiding." A mother in Detroit went live on TikTok, reading a letter she'd written to a man who'd denied her son. "Sarah Miller gave me courage," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm not afraid anymore." Inside, Olivia pressed forward, calling. A surprise witness, James Carter, a former security guard for Kennedy's 2018 Senate campaign. James, a burly man with a nervous gait, took the stand, his hands fidgeting as he swore the oath. "I worked for Mr. Kennedy's campaign," he said, his voice low but steady. I saw the books. That $5 million didn't just come from KJH Holdings. Part of it was siphoned from campaign funds, funneled through a fake consulting firm. The room erupted in gasps, lawmakers exchanging stunned glances. Campaign finance violations were a federal offense, a crack in Kennedy's armor that no amount of money could patch. Olivia handed James a document, a ledger page marked with red ink. "Can you confirm this is the record you saw?" she asked. James nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I kept a copy because I knew it wasn't right." The ledger showed a $2 million transfer from Kennedy's campaign account to a shell company, dated the same week as Maria's payment. Olivia turned to the committee, her voice rising just enough to carry the weight of the accusation. "This isn't just about a child being erased. It's about a man using his power and the public's money to bury his blood."
Kennedy
slammed his fist on the table, his voice booming. "Lies. This is a deep state setup." But the room didn't rally to him. Even his allies, seated in the back, looked uneasy, their eyes darting to the exits. Evelyn Carter banged her gavel. "Order, Mr. Kennedy. You'll have your chance to respond." Sarah, still seated, pulled a small leather journal from her bag. Its cover worn and cracked. She'd found it among her mother's things the week before, hidden in a locked box under Maria's bed. The pages were filled with Maria's handwriting, a chronicle of fear and sacrifice. Olivia had read it the night before, and now, with Sarah's permission, she opened it to a marked page and read aloud. "April 5th, 1998. They came to the house today. 2 men in suits, one with a briefcase. They said if I didn't sign, they'd take Sarah. I had no lawyer, no money. John promised it was for her future, but I knew it was for his. I signed because I was afraid. I'm still afraid." Olivia's voice didn't waver, but her hands trembled slightly as she closed the journal. "Maria Miller wasn't paid for her silence," she said. "She was threatened into it." Sarah's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, as if the truth itself was pressing down on every shoulder. Kennedy's legal team scrambled, whispering furiously. But Olivia wasn't done. She projected an email from Victor Crane, dated 2008, instructing Maria to stay away from public events and avoid contact with the Kennedy family. The email ended with a chilling line, "You know the consequences." Olivia turned to Sarah. "Ms. Miller, would you like to share what your mother told you about that day in 2008? Sarah nodded, her voice soft but piercing. "She said Mr. Kennedy saw me at the gala. He smiled, said I looked like him. Then his people told her to keep me hidden or I'd lose her. She was scared I'd end up in foster care." The room froze, the weight of her words sinking in. A Republican congressman in the back shifted uncomfortably, his pen dropping to the floor. Olivia placed the journal on the table next to the ring, the DNA test, and the ledger. "This is not speculation," she said. "This is a paper trail of power used to erase a child." Outside, the hashtag #IAM Sarah was no longer just a trend, it was a movement. Women gathered in small groups across the country, holding signs with Sarah's name, sharing stories of their silenced truths. In Atlanta, a group of students projected the gala photo onto a campus building, the image of young Sarah and Kennedy, glowing against the night sky. Olivia's phone buzzed with alerts from Rachel Cohen, who was live tweeting the hearing. Congresswoman Bennett just dropped a bombshell. Kennedy's campaign funds were tied to hush money. #IAM Sarah. But the victory was bittersweet. Sarah received a new wave of threats. One email reading, "You'll regret this, girl. Stay gone, Olivia." 2. Faced backlash. Her office was flooded with calls, some supportive, others vicious. A conservative talk show host called her a vulture, feeding on lies. But Olivia didn't waver. She met with Sarah that evening. In the same secure hotel room, the journals still in her hands. "They're scared," she told Sarah. "That means we're winning." The next morning, a new witness emerged. Elizabeth Kennedy, John's eldest daughter from his first marriage. She contacted Marcus Hayes, her voice trembling over the phone. "I didn't believe Sarah at first," she admitted. But I found something in my mother's old files, a letter from Maria, begging for help. My father shut it down." Elizabeth agreed to meet Sarah, a meeting Olivia arranged in secret. When they sat across from each other in a quiet D.C. cafe, Elizabeth's eyes widened at Sarah's face. "You look like him," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." Sarah didn't. Krishi just nodded, her hands steady. "I don't need his name," she said. "I just need mine." Elizabeth handed over the letter, a single page from 1998. Written in Maria's desperate scrawl, "Please, tell him to acknowledge her. She's his daughter." Olivia read it and felt a fire ignite in her chest. This wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It was about a family, a system, country that let power silence the vulnerable. As the hearing adjourned, Olivia submitted the journal, the email, and Elizabeth's letter to the committee, requesting a formal investigation by the Department of Justice. Evelyn Carter nodded, her face unreadable but her voice firm. "The evidence will be transmitted to the DOJ for review." Kennedy stood abruptly, his face flushed, and stormed out, his lawyers trailing like shadows. But the room didn't follow. Hemet stayed with Sarah, who sat still, her hands folded, her eyes fixed on the empty chair where he'd been. Olivia walked to her side, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did it?" she whispered. Sarah shook her head. "We did it." Outside, the chants grew louder. "Sarah is us." The hashtag #IamSarah hit 10 million mentions, a tidal wave of voices refusing to be silenced. Olivia looked out the chamber window, the Capitol dome glowing under the morning sun. Kennedy thought he'd set the trap, but he'd lit the fuse. The truth was out, and it wasn't going back into the shadows. Atlanta, Georgia, 10 a.m., March 15, 2025. The auditorium at Emory University shimmered with quiet pride. Its stage adorned with a single podium and a banner reading "Sarah Miller, Fund for Forgotten Voices." Sarah Miller stood at the center, her navy gown flowing beneath a white sash, her face calm but resolute. A year had passed since the oversight hearing that cracked open a truth buried by millions of dollars and decades of silence. "Congresswoman?" Olivia Bennett stood beside her, her eyes scanning the crowd of students, activists, and reporters, each face a testament to a movement that refused to fade. The dean stepped forward, his voice steady but warm. "Today, we award the first Sarah Miller Scholarship, endowed to support those whose identities were hidden by power." The room erupted in applause, but Sarah didn't smile, not yet. She closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and whispered to herself, "I exist. I'm written in." Across the city, news tickers blazed with a headline that shook the nation. House Ethics Committee opens formal investigation into John Kennedy for hush payments and perjury. The truth wasn't just free. It was rewriting history, and Sarah's name was its ink. The year since the hearing had been a whirlwind of triumphs and threats. The Department of Justice had launched a preliminary investigation into John Kennedy within days of the Oversight Committee's submission, citing potential campaign finance violations and perjury tied to his sworn denials of Sarah's existence. The evidence: DNA results, wire transfer receipts, Maria Miller's journal, and the damning recording from Emily Stone had been too solid to ignore. Olivia, now a household name, had become both a hero and a target. Her office received daily threats, some scrawled in venomous letters. Others hissed through anonymous voicemails. You'll pay for this, Bennett. Sarah, too, faced a barrage of hate. Her apartment was vandalized twice, her social media flooded with slurs. But she didn't retreat. Instead, she launched a website, Sarah's Voice, to share her story and connect with others who'd been silenced by power. The site crashed 3 times in its first week from sheer traffic, a testament to the hunger for her truth. A GoFundMe, meant to cover her legal fees, soared past $3 million. Not out of pity, but purpose, donors wrote messages like, "You're my courage and keep speaking, Sarah." Olivia, standing on the Emory stage, felt the weight of that year in her bones. She'd spent it building a coalition, not just in Congress, but in the streets, where women and men rallied under the hashtag #IamSarah. The movement had grown beyond Sarah's story, becoming a cry for every child denied a name, every mother forced to sign away her truth. Olivia's campaign for the U.S. Senate, announced just weeks after the hearing, was built on that cry. "No one gets erased anymore," she'd said at her first rally in Houston, her voice carrying over a crowd of thousands. The polls showed her neck and neck with her opponent, a Kennedy ally who called her a reckless agitator. But Olivia didn't care about the polls. She cared about the faces in the crowd, the ones who looked like Sarah, like her own mother, like the girl she'd once been, fighting to be seen. Now, as the dean handed Sarah a plaque engraved with her name, Olivia's chest tightened with something fiercer than pride. Hope the scholarship wasn't just a gesture, was a legacy. Endowed by anonymous donors, rumored to include a tech billionaire inspired by Sarah's courage. The fund would support students whose identities had been hidden by legal or familial secrecy. Sarah, accepting the plaque, spoke without notes, her voice soft but unyielding. "This isn't about me," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "It's about every kid who grew up wondering why their name wasn't enough. It's about every parent who signed a paper because they had no other choice." The applause was deafening, but Sarah's gaze drifted to a small table at the back, where a framed photo of her mother, Maria, sat beside a single rose. Maria had died 3 years earlier, her life a quiet struggle, her silence a wound that Sarah had vowed to heal. As the ceremony ended, Sarah slipped off the stage and knelt by the photo, her fingers tracing the frame. "They know now, Mom," she whispered. "They can't unknow me." Back in Washington, the House Ethics Committee moved with rare speed. Subpoenas were issued for Kennedy's financial records, including those of KJH Holdings, the shell company that had funneled the $5 million to Maria. A new piece of evidence had surfaced, uncovered by Rachel Cohen, the journalist who'd never stopped digging. It was a video from a 2008 security camera at Kennedy's Palm Beach estate. Grainy, but unmistakable. Kennedy, in a private meeting with Maria, handing her an envelope while a young Sarah played in the garden outside. His voice, caught faintly on the audio, said, "This ends it. No more contact." Rachel had obtained the footage from a former estate worker, now protected under federal whistleblower laws. When she published it, the internet ignited. #IamSarah hit 20 million mentions, and protests erupted outside Kennedy's offices in New York and Florida, with signs reading "Truth doesn't expire" and "Sarah is us." Kennedy, cornered, tried to fight back. From his gilded office in Manhattan, he recorded a video statement, released at 8 p.m. on March 1, 2025. The American flag gleamed behind him, his tone practiced, almost mournful. "This is a political assassination," he said, his eyes locked on the camera. "A fabrication by radicals who want to tear down my legacy. My family stands by me, as they always have." The video was 42 seconds long, but one phrase echoed like a gunshot. "My family." He didn't mention Sarah, didn't deny her explicitly, just erased her with omission. The backlash was swift. Commentators dissected his words, noting the absence of her name. A viral meme juxtaposed the gala photo with his statement, captioned, "He saw her. He just didn't want to." Kennedy's allies tried to spin it, flooding conservative outlets with claims of a deep state conspiracy. But the public wasn't buying it. The truth had a face now, and it was Sarah's. Elizabeth Kennedy. John's daughter from his first marriage became an unexpected ally. After meeting Sarah in that quiet D.C. cafe, she'd wrestled with her role in the family's silence. Elizabeth, a 35-year-old lawyer with her father's sharp jawline, had grown up in the shadow of his power, taught to protect the Kennedy name at all costs. But Maria's letter, found in her mother's old files, had shaken her. It read, "Please, tell him to acknowledge her. She's his daughter, and she deserves more than money." Elizabeth had confronted her father only to be met with a cold dismissal. "It's handled now." She was done handling it. She contacted Olivia, offering to testify. "I was part of the silence," she told her, her voice steady but heavy. "Not anymore." At a press conference on March 5, 2025, Elizabeth stood beside Sarah, her presence a seismic shift. "My father knew about Sarah," she said, her words broadcast live to millions. "He chose to hide her, not just from the world, but from us." The cameras flashed, capturing the sisters' faces. Sarah's quiet strength, Elizabeth's reluctant courage. The Kennedy family, once a monolith, was fracturing in public. Olivia seized the moment. She introduced a bill in Congress, dubbed Sarah's Law, to render non-disclosure agreements unenforceable in paternity cases involving public officials. "No one should have to sign away their identity," she said at a Capitol Hill press briefing, her voice ringing with conviction. "Not for money, not for fear, not for power." The bill gained traction, co-sponsored by Marcus Hayes and a dozen other lawmakers, including a few Republicans who'd been swayed by the evidence. The Ethics Committee's investigation deepened, uncovering a second payment of $1 million to a law firm in 2010. Again tied to Kennedy's campaign funds, with a memo line reading legal services. Rachel Cohen's reporting revealed the firm had no record of services rendered, was another cover for silence. The DOJ, now under pressure, issued a statement. "We are reviewing all submitted evidence for potential criminal charges, including perjury and campaign finance violations." Kennedy's legal team issued a weak rebuttal, claiming political persecution. But they didn't deny the payments, the DNA, or the video. They COULDN single quotes tied Sarah. Meanwhile, found herself at the center of a movement she hadn't meant to start. She visited community centers in Atlanta, speaking to groups of women and children who saw themselves in her story. At a town hall in Oakland, a grandmother stood and said, "I signed a paper like your mom did. I thought it was for my daughter's future. It wasn't." Sarah listened, her eyes glistening but her voice steady. "You're not alone anymore," she told the woman, and the room erupted in applause. Her website became a platform for others to share their stories, with thousands posting under hashtag #IamSarah. A young man in Philadelphia wrote, "My dad paid my mom to leave. I grew up thinking I wasn't worth claiming. Sarah showed me I am." A woman in Miami posted a photo of a blank birth certificate, her father's name redacted. "I'm Sarah, and I'm here." The stories poured in, a flood of truths breaking through decades of silence. On March 10, 2025, Sarah visited her mother's grave in a quiet cemetery outside Decatur. The headstone was simple, etched with Maria Miller, "Beloved Mother, Sarah." Knelt, placing a single rose and a copy of Sarah's Law, passed by the house the day before. "They know now, Mom," she whispered, her voice catching. "They can't pretend anymore." She'd brought Maria's journal, its pages worn from being read and reread. One entry, written in 2010, had haunted her. Sarah asked about her father today. "I told her he was a good man who couldn't stay. I lied to protect her, but it feels like I'm burying her too. Sarah closed the journal, her fingers lingering on the cover. She wasn't buried anymore, she was alive, seen, named Olivia. 2. Carried the weight of the fight. Her Senate campaign was gaining momentum, but it came at a cost. Her family received threats. Her car was followed one night by an unmarked SUV, and her staff reported suspicious emails. Yet, she pressed on, speaking at rallies across Texas, her message unwavering. This isn't about one man's secrets. It's about a system that lets the powerful erase the powerless. At a high school in Dallas, a student approached her after a speech, holding a crumpled note. "My mom was like Sarah's," the girl said. "Thank you for fighting." Olivia knelt, meeting her eyes. "I'm not fighting for her," she said softly. "I'm fighting with her." The girl nodded, her face fierce with hope, and slipped back into the crowd. Olivia carried that moment with her, a reminder of why she'd risked everything. The final blow came on March 12, 2025, when Rachel Cohen published a bombshell report, a 2010 email from Kennedy to his campaign manager, instructing him to divert funds to cover personal expenses. The email explicitly mentioned Maria Miller, calling her a loose end that needs tying. The report hit like a thunderclap, prompting the Federal Election Commission to join the DOJ's investigation. Kennedy went silent, his social media accounts dormant, his press team issuing only vague statements. For a man who'd built his empire on noise, the quiet was deafening. At a press conference outside the Capitol, Olivia stood with Sarah and Elizabeth, their presence a united front. "He tried to erase her," Olivia said, her voice cutting through the microphone static. "But Sarah Miller isn't just a name now, she's a law, a movement, a truth he can't outrun." Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady. "I don't need him to claim me," she said, "claiming myself." The ceremony at Emory was the culmination, but not the end. As Sarah accepted the scholarship plaque, she announced the expansion of her fund to include legal aid for those fighting NDAs. "No one should have to buy their identity," she said, her words echoing through the auditorium. Olivia watched, her heart swelling with something deeper than victory resolve. She'd announced her Senate run not for power, but for purpose, to ensure no one else had to fight as Sarah had. The crowd chanted, "Sarah is us." As Sarah stepped off the stage, her mother's photo still watching from the back, Olivia followed, pausing to touch the frame gently. "We got her, Maria," she whispered, in a quiet moment after the ceremony. Olivia visited a federal archive in Atlanta, a cold, windowless room where secrets were stored like relics. She found the file, Miller v. Kennedy, Case No. GA 2024, sealed but not forgotten. Inside were the DNA test, the journal, the video transcript, and the ring. She added a single page, handwritten in sharp, deliberate ink. Sarah Miller was never invisible. She made history instead. She closed the drawer, the click echoing like a final verdict. Outside, the world was still shifting. Hashtags and headlines carrying Sarah's name further than Kennedy's money ever could. The truth wasn't just free, it was alive, written in law, etched in memory, and carried by a nation that finally saw.